Okay, so we're gonna jump back in and talk through a portion of chapter 47. We took the first part of chapter 47 in the last video where we talked about um, Jacob and his sons being presented to Pharaoh and being given the land of Goshen. But there is a separate little passage kind of in the middle of this that is Genesis, still first book of the Bible, chapter 47, verses 13 through 26. So from 13 to 26 is what we're going to cover in this video. And there is a famine in the land. We have talked about this famine through 100 of last videos because it is that long. And so effectively what happens is Joseph is put in charge of preparing the land of Egypt for this famine. There are 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And so the 7 years of plenty will give enough food so that during the 7 years of famine, there is going to be something there for the people to survive. And so the 7 years of plenty, Joseph is in charge. He creates these storehouses. He creates all these things. And he's kind of sets up this program that there's this food storage so that when the 7 years of famine hit, they are covered. And so, of course, the people are okay for the first year. But at the end of the first year, you start to run into all these problems. And so as the famine progresses, the people have run through all of their own storehouses because the people were prepared for famine as well. Other countries and other places like Canaan, where Joseph's family was not prepared because they didn't know it was coming, but Egypt knew. So they had their own kind of preparations. And so as those preparations have worn out, they have come to the storehouses to buy food. And so this effectively is like a grocery store at this point. So when we pick up in verse 13, Joseph has set up pretty much grocery stores all the way around. The food is in storage there. They, of course, have animals, but they still need to be able to feed these animals grains and wheats and things like that. They have water, it appears, but they don't have, the ground is not yielding any food. Nothing's coming out. When it does come out, it's in bad shape and not really good for food. So there is no food. They have meat, but of course they need these animals. The animals have to eat. So now they're in really rough spots. And so they've done what they can on their own. And so they start to come in to the leadership of Egypt, the government that's set up. And Joseph is in charge of this. And so he sets up grocery stores and people are coming now for food. And so what they first do is come in with money. And so in verse 13, it says, there's no bread in all the land, and the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. There's no food. And they are out of food, and they don't have options for food. And so it says that Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the corn which was bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Egypt's getting rich. So all the people who are in Egypt and all the people who are in Canaan first start coming to these grocery stores with money. I got some money. Let me buy some corn. Yep, let me buy some corn. Let me buy this. Let me buy this. Let me buy that. And so they're able to buy the crops that they need to be able to feed their animals, to be able to feed themselves, to be able to make breads, to be able to do all the stuff that they need to do. They're able to come in and get this grain, these things that grow up from the ground. Okay. These vegetables and fruits and the wheats and barleys and things like that used to make food. And so they start coming with money and buy it. And then in verse 15 it says, when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread. Why should we die because we don't have any more money? Because we're out of money. I can't buy it. I don't have no money left. So why should I have to die because there's no more money? You have food. I'm hungry. And I can't have it because I don't have any more money. There's no money left in the land. It's only you have all the money. So Egypt, the government of Egypt has gotten real rich. And so he says, give me your cattle. And if you give me your cattle, when you run out of money, just start giving me your cattle. And so in verse 17, it says they bring the cattle to Joseph. And Joseph gives them bread in exchange for horses, for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle. So not only do they have all the money in the land, they now have all of the animals in the land. Egypt is getting real rich. And by Egypt, I don't mean the people, I don't mean the land, I don't mean any of that. I mean the government of Egypt is getting really, really rich. And so in verse 18, it says, when that year ended, they came to him in the second year and said, we know that our money has been spent. We know that you have our herds and our flocks. We don't have nothing left but our bodies in the land. We don't have anything left but our bodies and the land. What are we going to do? Like, I don't have any more animals left. I don't have any money left. All I have is the land that my house sits on and the people that live in the house. And so, do we have to die? You got food. I don't have any more of the things that you're willing to take for the food. So, what do we do? And so, it says, buy us our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants to Pharaoh. Give us seed, that we may live and not die. They sell themselves into the ownership of and their lands. So if they're selling their lands, and if they sell their lands and they work everything they do on their lands, all their hard work, all their farming, all their crops, all of their homes, all those things belong to the people who own the land. So they are effectively trading off the last thing that they own. They trade off their lands, and they're saying we'll be servants to you. Because if you own the land and I'm farming it, it's your farm. So that's what they're doing. So they have not sold themselves into slavery. They've sold themselves. They've sold their land, and now they are effectively like sharecroppers. They have like a co-op where there's a team of ownership that's the government, and they work for them. So this is like government housing at this point. The government owns their property. And so it says Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and the Egyptians sold every man his field because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. Pharaoh owns all the money because they had no more. All the cattle, all the flocks, donkeys, every animal they've sold. And they've sold all their land. So this is not, let's be clear, this is not the Israelites. This is the Egyptian people. The Egyptian people are the ones who have lost and sold off everything during this famine. The only people unaffected by this are in verse 22. It is the priest, because the priest worked for Pharaoh and got their food as part of their paycheck, got their portion of food as part of their paycheck. They were provided for. The Israelites, who are Jacob and his sons and his grandsons at this point, are in Goshen living off the land. They are given a portion as part of being Joseph's house. They are not affected by this. They are not selling off all their money. Everyone in Canaan, all the people in Canaan who are trying to survive have gone through this as well. Canaan was included in this. Only the priests and the Israelites have not been touched because they are underneath Joseph. The Israelites are underneath Joseph as part of his household they're eating, and the priests work for Pharaoh. So they are untouched. And so in verse 23, it says, Joseph says to the people, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Y'all don't got nothing else to sell. You can't sell yourself into slavery because I technically already own you. I own everything you have. I own all of your animals, all your lands, all your money. You don't have anything if it's not for me. And so now you're working the land that I own. I already own you. Ain't no point in you even trying to sell yourself into slavery. What else you gonna get for it? I have everything. The only thing you can do is work for me. And so he says, what is going to happen is, in verse 24, you'll give the 5th part to Pharaoh, and 4 parts should be your own, for seed and for your food and for them of your household. So you're gonna tithe a fifth back to Pharaoh. So when you have your own crops, that's cool. So now I'm only giving you. So when you have your own, that's what you're gonna give me. But also right now, when I hand you what you asked for, you only get 80%. The fifth part belongs to Pharaoh. When you grow a crop, you get 80%. That fifth part, that 20%, Pharaoh. And in verse 26, it says that he made it a law in the land except for the land of the priests, which Pharaoh does not own, because they didn't need to sell off anything, because of course they are provided for due to their position. Okay, so I'm gonna stop at 26 because 27 kind of rolls into the next chapter in the way we're going to discuss it. So, quick recap: Egypt gets rich. The famine presses on. The Egyptian people and anyone who's in Canaan at this time, they have to bring all their money, and they bring money to buy food. So Joseph effectively sets up these storehouses of food as grocery stores. They come in, they buy what they can. When they run out of money, they start to trade off their animals. And when they trade off all their animals, and there's none of those left, that's sheep, cows, camels, donkeys, everything's in this mix. When they've traded off all their animals, they have nothing left but their land and their ability to work the land. And so now they trade off their land. So Egypt now has all their money, has all their cattle, and now owns all the lands. People don't own their own land independently. Egypt is fully owned by Pharaoh and the contents of it. And the people themselves are not enslaved at this time. They are in a state of stuck, basically, because if Pharaoh owns the land and all your animals, all you can do is work to pay him. And once they get to that point where there's nothing left to sell, there's nothing left to trade, nothing left to barter with, he says, look, from now on, y'all get 80%. That's the max, 80%. Y'all taxed off the top. 20% belongs to Pharaoh. And he collects it. 20% of everything you have belongs to Pharaoh at this point. So when they come to get food, they get 80%. When they raise a crop, they get to keep 80%. Taxed. So, in this, we are understanding more about the Egyptian government and the ownership of Egypt, so that when we get into Exodus and we talk about the removal of the Israelites as a great nation from the land of Egypt, we understand kind of the political position, the financial position the country is in. So, y'all, I want you to go and absolutely be blessed.